Kethvar sat in the small chair that barely fit his long body and stared at the datapad in his hands. The assignment seemed simple enough for a junior analyst like him. Watch humans fight and write down what they do. The Galactic Confederation had done this many times before with other new species that started building ships and weapons. Most of the time, these reports were boring, and the new species either joined the galaxy peacefully or got themselves destroyed by someone stronger. Commander. Zeftal walked into the briefing room with the slow steps of someone who had given this same talk hundreds of times. His forearms moved in practiced gestures as he activated the wall display. Images of a blue and green planet appeared along with data about the species that lived there. Humans, the commander said in his tired voice. Discovered 6 months ago, when they started building defense platforms around their home world. Nothing special about them, really. They fight with chemical rockets and metal bullets like most primitive species do. The interesting part is that they are already at war. Kethvar looked at the images of human ships. They looked crude and basic compared to Confederation vessels. But something about their design felt different. Where most species built ships that looked graceful and curved, the human ships looked angry and sharp with hard edges and weapons pointing in every direction. The enemy is called the Zerian Collective, Commander Zeftal continued. They invaded human space 3 weeks ago with a standard conquest fleet. We expect the humans to lose within 2 months based on the technology gap. Your job is to observe and document human military tactics for our archives. The commander handed Kethvar a small device that would keep him invisible to both human and Zerion sensors. It was advanced technology that very few species in the galaxy could detect. Kethvar had used similar devices before when watching other primitive wars, and they always worked perfectly. The humans have a command station near their 6th planet. The commander explained, "You will position yourself there and observe their fleet operations. Standard procedure applies. Do not interfere no matter what happens. Do not reveal yourself under any circumstances. Just watch and record." Kethvar nodded and gathered his equipment. This assignment would probably take a few weeks at most. Primitive species either surrendered quickly when faced with superior technology or fought hopeless battles that ended in their complete destruction. Either way, the data would be useful for the Confederation military to understand how this region of space worked. The journey to human space took 2 days using Confederation jump drives. Kethvar emerged from hyperspace near the gas giant the humans called Jupiter and immediately activated his cloaking device. The human command station came into view, and he was surprised by what he saw. Instead of one large station, like most species built, the humans had created a network of smaller platforms connected by thick cables and defensive barriers. Each platform seemed designed for a different purpose, with some clearly meant for ship construction, others for communications, and several that looked like pure weapons platforms. The whole structure moved and shifted constantly as new ships arrived and departed. Kethvar positioned his small observation ship near one of Jupiter's moons and began recording. Human ships came and went in patterns that seemed random at first. But gradually, he began to see an organization that was different from anything in his training. Most species used simple formations and predictable movement patterns, but the humans seemed to deliberately avoid any kind of standard approach. He watched Admiral Jake Morrison give orders to ship captains through intercepted communications. The human commander spoke in short, quick sentences that somehow managed to convey complex tactical information. What struck Kethvar most was how calm Morrison seemed despite receiving reports that Zerian forces outnumbered human ships by more than 5-1. Implement asymmetric protocols. Morrison told his captains, "Remember that they think like everyone else in the galaxy. We do not." Kethvar did not understand what asymmetric protocols meant, but something about the way Morrison said it made him feel uncomfortable. In all his training about galactic warfare, he had learned that there were accepted ways to fight battles. Ships formed lines and exchanged fire at long range. The side with better technology and more ships usually won. Casualties were kept to minimum and surrender was always accepted when offered. But as he listened to more human communications, Kethvar began to realize that humans might not follow these rules. They talked about something called total victory and used phrases like acceptable losses that suggested they were willing to sacrifice their own people to achieve their goals. Most disturbing was how they seemed to enjoy the challenge of being outnumbered. Captain Ryan Hughes reported from the destroyer USS Defiance that his crew was excited about the upcoming battle. Excited. Kethvar had observed dozens of species at war, and none of them ever seemed excited about fighting. They fought because they had to or because they were ordered to, but humans seemed to actually want to fight. As night fell over the command station, Kethvar prepared his first report for the Confederation. He wrote about human ship designs and their unusual command structure. But he found himself struggling to explain the feeling he was getting from observing them. Something was different about humans, but he could not identify exactly what it was. Tomorrow the real fighting would begin, and Kethvar would finally see how humans actually fought. He expected it to be over quickly. The first battle happened near Saturn, and Kethvar watched it through his sensors with growing disbelief. A human patrol fleet of 12 ships encountered a Zarion battle group of 60 vessels. According to everything Kethvar had learned in the Academy, the humans should have immediately retreated or called for reinforcements. Instead, Commander Lisa Parker ordered her ships to accelerate directly toward the enemy. All ships increase speed to maximum, Parker commanded over the radio. We are going in hard and fast. Remember your training and trust your equipment. Kethvar checked his instruments twice to make sure they were working correctly. The human ships were not just moving toward the Zarion fleet. They were accelerating to speeds that should have torn their hulls apart. Most galactic species built ships with comfort and safety in mind, but human vessels seemed designed to push every limit. The Zarion commander tried to establish communication, requesting that the humans surrender according to galactic warfare conventions. The response from Commander Parker was simple and terrifying. Surrender is not in our vocabulary today. What happened next made Kethvar question everything he knew about space combat. Instead of forming a battle line and exchanging long-range fire, the human ships scattered in all directions. Some dove toward Saturn's rings, while others used the planet's gravity to slingshot around at impossible angles. The Zarion ships tried to maintain formation, but found themselves confused and unable to track targets that moved like nothing they had ever seen. Captain Ryan Hughes in the destroyer USS Defiance performed a maneuver that violated every principle of space warfare. He aimed his ship directly at a Zarion cruiser 3 times larger than his own vessel and accelerated to ramming speed. But this was not a desperate suicide attack. At the last moment, Hughes fired every weapon his ship had while using what humans called a kinetic penetrator mounted on his bow. The reinforced front of the human ship punched through the Zarion shields like they were made of paper. The alien cruiser broke apart in a massive explosion that lit up the space around Saturn. Hughes had not only survived the impact, but his ship emerged from the other side of the explosion ready to fight again. Target destroyed, Hughes reported, calmly looking for the next one. Lieutenant Commander Amy Torres led a squadron that used the debris field from destroyed ships as cover. Her ships would disappear into the wreckage and then emerge without warning to deliver devastating close-range attacks before vanishing again. The Zarion ships with their advanced sensors could not track human vessels that moved through fields of metal and ice that would have destroyed any other ships. Kethvar realized the humans were using Saturn's rings as a weapon. They had studied the local environment and turned it into an advantage. Where other species would see obstacles, the humans saw opportunities. Their ships were built specifically to operate in conditions that would disable most galactic vessels. The battle became a nightmare for the Zarion forces. They had expected to fight according to established rules, with ships maintaining safe distances and exchanging fire in an orderly manner. Instead, they found themselves in close quarters, combat with opponents who fought like wild animals. Human. Ships appeared from impossible angles, delivering attacks that no sane commander would attempt. Commander Torres led her squadron in an attack pattern that made Kethvar sick to watch. Her ships dove directly into the Zarian formation, ignoring enemy fire and concentrating on causing maximum damage to as many targets as possible. When her ship took hits, she did not retreat for repairs, but continued fighting with damaged systems, sparking and hull plates missing. "Damage control reports minor hull breach," Torres announced, continuing attack run. What the humans called minor damage would have forced any other species to withdraw immediately, but human ships seemed designed to keep fighting even when they were falling apart. Kethvar watched human crews work to repair their vessels while still engaged in combat, something he had never seen in decades of observing galactic warfare. The Zarian commander finally attempted to surrender when half his fleet was destroyed, or disabled. According to galactic conventions, there should have been an honor period where both sides stopped fighting and discussed terms. The humans accepted the surrender, but immediately began interrogating prisoners for tactical intelligence. Captain Hughes boarded a damaged Zarian vessel with a team of Marines and began demanding information about enemy fleet positions and supply lines. There was no cooling-off period, no time for the defeated enemy to recover their composure. The humans wanted intelligence, and they wanted it immediately. "We need to know where your main fleet is located," Hughes told the Zarian captain. "And we need to know now." Kethvar was shocked by this violation of warfare protocols. In civilized combat, there were rules about how prisoners were treated and when intelligence gathering could begin. The humans seemed unaware that such rules existed or simply did not care about following them. What disturbed Kethvar most was how the humans reacted to their victory. Instead of celebrating or taking time to repair their ships, they immediately began planning the next attack. Commander Parker gathered her surviving captains and started discussing how to use the intelligence they had gained to strike at more Zarian targets. "We hurt them today," Parker told her officers. "But hurt is not enough. We need to make sure they cannot hurt us again." The human concept of victory seemed to be different from what other species considered acceptable. Where most galactic civilizations fought to achieve specific limited goals, the humans appeared to be fighting to eliminate their enemy's ability to fight back. They were not interested in conquest or territory, but in making sure their opponents could never threaten them again. As the human fleet departed toward their next target, Kethvar began writing his report with hands that shook slightly. He had witnessed something that did not fit into any category of warfare he knew. The humans had not just won a battle, they had redefined what battle meant. The Zarian survivors would carry word back to their fleet about an enemy that fought without honor or restraint. But Kethvar suspected that the Zarians would not understand what they were really facing until it was too late. He was beginning to suspect that he did not understand either. Kethvar spent the next week observing human military operations and sending increasingly worried reports back to the Confederation. What he was seeing did not match any known patterns of galactic warfare. The humans had concepts and strategies that seemed designed specifically to violate every principle of civilized combat. The most disturbing discovery was something humans called overkill. Where other species used measured responses and proportional force, the humans seemed to believe that too much firepower was barely enough. Colonel Steve Martinez demonstrated this philosophy during the defense of Europa Station. When a Zarian siege fleet arrived with standard bombardment weapons, Martinez did not simply deploy defensive shields or call for reinforcements. Instead, he activated something called Project Damocles that made Kethvar check his sensors 3 times to confirm what he was seeing. Human mining ships had been converting asteroids into guided projectiles. Each rock was fitted with engines and guidance systems, then accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. The asteroids weighed thousands of tons and struck Xerion ships with the force of nuclear weapons. Target the command ships first. Martinez ordered his gunners, then work your way down through their fleet structure. The Xerion fleet never had a chance to respond. Their shields were designed to deflect energy weapons and small projectiles, but nothing in galactic warfare prepared them for mountain-sized rocks traveling at relativistic speeds. Ship after ship simply ceased to exist as the asteroids tore through their formations. But the humans did not stop when the immediate threat was eliminated. Martinez continued the bombardment until every piece of Xerion debris was reduced to particles too small to salvage. When his officers suggested that the enemy was sufficiently defeated, Martinez looked at them with an expression that chilled Kethvar. Sufficiently defeated means they can come back. Martinez explained, "We want completely defeated, which means they cannot come back." Major Katie Sullivan led ground operations that reinforced Kethvar's growing understanding of human military doctrine. When Xerion forces occupied a moon in the Jupiter system, Sullivan did not simply retake the territory. Her forces systematically destroyed every structure the aliens had built, then used chemical weapons to make the soil toxic to Xerion biology. The human approach to warfare seemed designed to make any future conflict impossible. They did not just defeat enemies, they eliminated the enemy's ability to threaten them again. Sullivan's troops spent days after their victory planting devices that would explode if Xerion technology was detected anywhere on the moon's surface. "We are not just fighting a battle," Sullivan told her subordinates. "We are ending a war before it can really begin." General Paul Robinson revealed the scope of human strategic thinking during a command meeting that Kethvar managed to intercept. The humans did not just plan for the current war with the Xerions, they had detailed strategies for fighting every known species in the galaxy, including their potential allies. "The Altarians have superior energy weapons but weak hull armor," Robinson explained to his staff. "Kinetic attacks would be most effective. The Vegan Collective relies on automated systems, so electronic warfare would disable their fleets. The Centauri Republic uses predictable formation tactics that our scatter protocols could exploit." Kethvar realized that humans had been studying galactic military capabilities long before they made official contact. They had contingency plans for scenarios that other species never considered possible. Most disturbing was how casually they discussed fighting multiple enemies simultaneously. Captain Julie Kim showed her troops training recordings that made Kethvar understand why human soldiers were so effective. While other species trained for victory, humans trained for survival under impossible conditions. They practiced fighting when outnumbered, outgunned, and technologically inferior. "The enemy will always have advantages," Kim told her Marines. "Our job is to make sure their advantages do not matter." Human soldiers learned to continue fighting even when command structure was destroyed. Every individual was trained to act independently and make tactical decisions without orders. The result was an army where defeat of leadership did not result in surrender, but in thousands of independent fighters continuing the war. Kethvar watched human war games that simulated combat against hypothetical enemies with overwhelming technological superiority. The humans had developed tactics specifically designed to defeat opponents who should have been unbeatable. They studied how to turn enemy strengths into weaknesses and how to exploit any advantage no matter how small. What made these observations truly terrifying was how successful human strategies proved to be. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, they were winning battles that should have been impossible. The Xerion Collective had superior technology and more ships, but they were losing the war because they could not adapt to human tactics. Commander Greg Thompson intercepted Xerion communications that revealed the enemy's growing panic. Xerion. Commanders were requesting reinforcements and new orders because nothing in their military training prepared them for opponents who fought like humans. They do not follow any known patterns. One Xerion report stated, "They attack, when they should retreat, defend when they should attack, and fight when they should surrender. The humans seemed to take pride in being unpredictable. They deliberately avoided standard tactics not because they did not know better, but because being different gave them advantages. Where other species valued honor and tradition in warfare, humans valued results above everything else. Captain Nina Foster led operations that targeted Xerion supply lines using methods that violated galactic warfare conventions. Instead of attacking military targets, she focused on infrastructure that supported enemy operations. Food production facilities, manufacturing centers, and communication networks were destroyed with ruthless efficiency. "We are not just fighting their ships," Foster explained. "We are fighting their ability to build ships, maintain ships, and coordinate ships." Kethvar began to understand that humans viewed war as a problem to be solved rather than a trial of honor or strength. They approached military conflict with the same systematic methodology they used for scientific research or engineering projects. The goal was not glorious victory, but complete elimination of the threat. The most chilling realization came when Kethvar accessed human military academy curricula. They were already incorporating lessons learned from fighting the Xerions into training programs for future conflicts. This war was not an aberration for humans. It was practice for the next war and the war after that. Admiral Morrison's announcement changed everything, and Kethvar felt a cold fear settle in his chest as he listened to the human commander address his fleet. Defensive operations were concluded, Morrison declared, and now humanity would begin what he called total war. Kethvar had expected standard counteroffensive operations to reclaim lost territory, but what the humans planned was something entirely different. "We have learned how they fight," Morrison told his captains. "Now we will teach them how we fight when we are not holding back." Commander Greg Thompson led the first deep strike mission into Xerion space using technology that should not have existed. Somehow the humans had reverse-engineered Confederation cloaking systems and improved them far beyond original specifications. Entire fleets simply vanished from sensors while moving at combat speeds, something that was supposed to be impossible. Kethvar checked his equipment multiple times but could not detect the human ships, even though he knew approximately where they were. The cloaking technology was better than what his own observation vessel used, and the implications of that discovery made him seriously consider abandoning his mission and returning to Confederation space immediately. The human deep strike. Forces did not attack military targets first. Captain Nina Foster led precision strikes against Xerion supply depots, communication relays, and manufacturing centers scattered across a dozen star systems. But these were not temporary raids. Designed to cause disruption, they were permanent destructions, calculated to cripple Xerion ability to wage war. "Target the antimatter production facility first," Foster ordered her strike team. "Then the shipyard control centers, then the supply depot coordination hubs." The humans had studied Xerion industrial capacity in detail and identified exactly which targets would cause cascading system failures throughout enemy territory. When Foster's ships destroyed a single antimatter facility, 3 star systems lost power simultaneously. When they eliminated shipyard control centers, dozens of vessels under construction became useless hulks. Kethvar realized the humans were not just attacking infrastructure, they were systematically dismantling Xerion civilization's ability to support military operations. Every target was chosen for maximum strategic impact rather than immediate tactical advantage. The humans thought in terms of long-term consequences rather than short-term victories. Colonel Rick Turner introduced Kethvar to humanity's most terrifying weapon psychological warfare conducted on a species-wide scale. Human forces began broadcasting messages throughout Xerion space, but these were not demands for surrender or threats of destruction. Instead, they transmitted recordings of human military capabilities. The broadcasts showed human soldiers continuing to fight while wounded human ships ramming enemy vessels and human commanders calmly planning the complete destruction of Xerion worlds. The messages were designed to break enemy morale by demonstrating that humans were fundamentally different from any opponent the Xerions had faced before. "We want them to understand what they are fighting," Turner explained to his psychological operations team, "not so they will surrender, but so they will know that surrender will not save them." Lieutenant Colonel Angela Brooks coordinated something called Protocol Scorch that made Kethvar question whether humans qualified as a civilized species. Rather than occupying Xerion territory, the humans made it uninhabitable for decades. They did not just deny resources to their enemies, they eliminated the possibility of those resources ever being useful again. Brooks's teams used weapons that altered planetary atmospheres, making worlds toxic to Xerion biology while remaining perfectly suitable for human colonization. Entire star systems were rendered useless to their original inhabitants but ready for human settlement. It was genocide disguised as terraforming, and it was happening on a scale that defied comprehension. "We are not taking their territory," Brooks told her subordinates. "We are taking their future." The Xerion Collective attempted to negotiate following standard galactic protocols for ending warfare between civilizations. They offered territorial concessions, resource-sharing agreements, and technological exchanges through established diplomatic channels. Ambassador Veltar, speaking for the Xerions, sent repeated messages requesting talks with human leadership. Admiral Morrison's response demonstrated that humans did not think like other galactic species. He did not reject the peace offers, he ignored them completely. Instead, he accelerated military operations and issued new orders to his fleet commanders that made Kethvar's blood run cold. "Phase 3 is now authorized," Morrison announced. "Civilian population centers are valid targets under rules of total war." Captain Alex Rodriguez received orders to begin operations against Xerion civilian populations, but the humans did not engage in simple massacre. Their approach was more calculated and somehow more terrifying than outright genocide. They began reshaping Xerion worlds to be uninhabitable for the native species while preparing them for human colonization. Major Susan Clark led operations designed to break Xerion will to fight by demonstrating human technological superiority. Her teams used weather control systems to create permanent storms on enemy worlds, atmospheric processors to alter air composition, and gravitational manipulators to change planetary rotation speeds. The Xerions watched helplessly as their homeworlds became alien environments where their species could not survive. But the changes were not random destruction, they were systematic terraforming that would eventually create perfect conditions for human settlement. The humans were not just destroying their enemies, they were claiming their territory for future generations. General Lucas Bennett revealed the true scope of human strategic planning during staff briefings that Kethvar intercepted. The humans were not just fighting the Xerion Collective, they were preparing for conflicts with every other species in the galactic community. Bennett's team had developed specific strategies for defeating each known civilization using intelligence gathered over decades of secret observation. The Altarians rely on energy shields that are vulnerable to sustained kinetic bombardment. Bennett explained, "The Vegan Collective uses automated defense systems that can be overwhelmed by simultaneous attacks from multiple vectors. The Centauri Republic maintains centralized command structures that can be disrupted by targeted electromagnetic pulses." Kethvar realized that humanity had been studying potential enemies long before making official contact with galactic civilization. They had contingency plans for fighting species that considered them allies and strategies for conflicts that had not yet occurred. Most terrifying was their confidence that these plans would actually work. Commander Tracy Williams led the final assault on the Xerion homeworld, but not to occupy it. Human forces deployed what they called evolutionary weapons, designed to alter the fundamental biology of the planet. The weapons would not just kill current inhabitants, but ensure that Xerion physiology could never again survive in that environment. The Xerion homeworld would become a human world, and there would be no possibility of the original inhabitants ever returning. It was the ultimate expression of human military doctrine, complete elimination of the enemy's ability to pose future threats, combined with expansion of human territorial control. The Xerion Collective's final attempt at negotiation revealed just how completely they misunderstood what they were fighting. Ambassador Veltar transmitted formal surrender offers through galactic diplomatic channels proposing territorial concessions, resource-sharing agreements, and even technological exchanges. The proposals followed every established protocol for ending interspecies conflicts and should have been acceptable to any civilized government. Admiral Morrison's response made Kethvar understand that humans operated by fundamentally different rules than the rest of galactic society. Morrison did not respond to the diplomatic overtures at all. Instead, he issued orders that accelerated human military operations and expanded their scope beyond anything Kethvar had witnessed before. The enemy still believes this is a war that can be ended with negotiations. Morrison told his staff, "They do not understand that we are not fighting for territory or resources. We are fighting for the right to exist without threats." Captain Alex. Rodriguez received authorization to begin Phase 3 operations against Xerion civilian populations. But the humans did not simply target non-combatants for destruction. Their methods were far more sophisticated and ultimately more terrifying than conventional genocide. They began systematic conversion of Xerion worlds to make them suitable for human habitation while ensuring the original inhabitants could never return. Rodriguez led fleets equipped with terraforming technology that had been weaponized in ways that violated every galactic convention regarding warfare between civilizations. Atmospheric processors designed for peaceful colonization were modified to create environmental conditions that were toxic to Xerion biology, but perfectly suited for human settlement. "We are not destroying their worlds," Rodriguez explained to his subordinates. "We are claiming them for humanity's future." Major Susan Clark coordinated planetary conversion operations that demonstrated human technological capabilities in ways that broke Xerion resistance more effectively than direct military attacks. Clark's teams used weather control systems to create permanent storm patterns that made Xerion cities uninhabitable while establishing climate conditions ideal for human agriculture. Gravitational manipulators altered planetary rotation speeds and orbital patterns, creating day-night cycles that matched human biological needs rather than Xerion requirements. Ocean chemistry was modified to support Earth-based marine life while becoming toxic to native Xerion organisms. Entire ecosystems were systematically replaced with Earth equivalents. The Xerions found themselves watching their homeworlds transform into alien environments where their species could not survive. But these changes were not random destruction. They were carefully planned terraforming operations that would create perfect conditions for human expansion into this region of space. General Lucas Bennett revealed the full scope of human strategic planning when he briefed senior commanders on post-war scenarios. The humans were not just defeating the Xerion Collective. They were establishing themselves as the dominant power in this sector while preparing for inevitable conflicts with other galactic civilizations. Every species in the galactic community represents a potential threat to human security. Bennett explained, "We must be prepared to defend ourselves against any combination of enemies using whatever advantages we can develop." Bennett's staff had analyzed the military capabilities of dozens of species and developed specific strategies for defeating each one. They had studied galactic history to identify patterns of alliance and conflict, then created contingency plans for every possible combination of threats humanity might face. What made these preparations truly terrifying was how confident the humans seemed about their chances of success. They did not view other galactic civilizations as superior opponents to be feared, but as problems to be solved using human ingenuity and determination. Commander Tracy Williams led the final assault on the Xerion homeworld using weapons that redefined what warfare meant in the galactic community. Human forces deployed what they called evolutionary weapons, designed to alter the fundamental biological compatibility between a species and their native environment. These weapons did not simply kill current inhabitants, they permanently modified planetary conditions to ensure that Xerion physiology could never again function in that environment. The homeworld would become uninhabitable for its original species while being perfectly suited for human colonization. "We are not just winning this war," Williams told her troops. "We are ensuring that no similar war can ever happen again." Chief Warrant Officer Danny Murphy led engineering teams that systematically dismantled Xerion technology and incorporated useful elements into human military systems. The humans were not just defeating their enemies, they were absorbing their capabilities and becoming stronger with each victory. Murphy's teams studied Xerion energy weapons, shield systems, and propulsion technology, then developed improved versions. That combined alien innovations with human engineering approaches. Within months, human ships were equipped with hybrid systems that were superior to either species' original designs. "Every enemy we defeat makes us stronger," Murphy explained. "Their knowledge becomes our knowledge. Their technology becomes our technology. Their territory becomes our territory." Colonel Stephanie Adams casually mentioned during a staff meeting that Earth's military academies were already incorporating lessons learned from the Xerion conflict into training curricula for future officers. The war was being treated not as a unique event, but as a learning experience that would improve human military effectiveness in subsequent conflicts. Adams showed Kethvar tactical analysis reports that studied every aspect of the campaign against the Xerions. Human military theorists were identifying which strategies worked best against different types of opponents and developing doctrine that could be applied to future wars against unknown enemies. "We now understand how to fight enemies with superior technology," Adams noted. "The next challenge will be developing methods for fighting enemies with different advantages, such as numerical superiority or alliance systems." The implications of human military development became clear to Kethvar as he observed their post-victory planning. The humans viewed the Xerion War as the first step in establishing themselves as a galactic power rather than the end of a specific conflict. They were already preparing for wars that had not yet begun against enemies they had not yet identified. Human intelligence services led by Colonel Patricia Hayes had compiled detailed assessments of every major galactic civilization, including military capabilities, political structures, and potential vulnerabilities. Hayes had contingency plans for fighting the entire Galactic Confederation simultaneously, and she seemed confident that such plans could actually succeed. "The galaxy operates according to predictable patterns," Hayes told her intelligence analysts. "Species that have enjoyed technological superiority for centuries have become complacent about military innovation. They assume that their advantages will always protect them." Kethvar realized that humans had identified the fundamental weakness of galactic civilization, its reliance on established patterns and conventional approaches to conflict. While other species had spent centuries perfecting traditional warfare, humans had developed methods specifically designed to defeat traditional approaches. The war was ending not with Xerion surrender, but with Xerion extinction as a spacefaring civilization. Their worlds were being converted for human use. Their technology was being absorbed into human systems, and their survivors were being relocated to reservation areas where they could not threaten human expansion. Most disturbing was how efficiently the humans had accomplished this transformation and how little it seemed to cost them in resources or casualties. Kethvar stared at the completed data files that contained everything he had observed during his mission and felt the weight of an impossible decision pressing down on him. His duty as a Confederation intelligence analyst required him to file a complete and accurate report, but the implications of that report would fundamentally alter galactic civilization in ways that might destroy it entirely. The humans had achieved something that military theorists considered impossible. They had developed doctrines specifically designed to defeat technologically superior opponents. Every principle of galactic warfare assumed rough technological parity and adherence to civilized combat protocols. Humans ignored both assumptions and had proven that neither was actually necessary for victory. Admiral Morrison somehow became aware of Kethvar's presence despite advanced cloaking technology and requested a private meeting. The human commander arranged for the encounter to take place on a small asteroid where both could meet safely without compromising either side's security protocols. Morrison appeared without weapons or escorts and spoke to Kethvar with the casual confidence of someone who held all the advantages in a negotiation. The admiral explained that Earth's military intelligence had detected Confederation observation technology from the beginning of the conflict and had deliberately allowed Kethvar to witness human capabilities. "We wanted the galactic community to understand what humanity represents," Morrison said calmly. "The question now is whether that understanding will lead to peaceful coexistence or to the war that we have been preparing for since we first detected your ships in our space." Morrison presented Kethvar with detailed intelligence on Confederation military capabilities that should have been impossible for humans to obtain. They had been studying potential enemies for decades, using observation techniques that surpassed anything in Kethvar's experience. The humans knew more about galactic civilization than most galactic citizens did. "Your people assume that technological superiority guarantees military superiority," Morrison continued. "But technology is only one factor in warfare, and it is not the most important factor when your opponents understand how to neutralize technological advantages." Colonel Patricia Hayes joined the meeting and revealed that Earth had contingency plans for fighting the entire Galactic Confederation simultaneously. She showed Kethvar strategic assessments that identified weaknesses in every major galactic civilization and outlined methods for exploiting those weaknesses in combined operations against multiple enemies. "We have studied how your species fight, individually and in alliance." Hayes explained, "Your tactics are predictable because you assume that certain approaches to warfare are inherently superior. You have never faced opponents who deliberately chose different approaches." The human intelligence. Chief presented scenarios where Earth's forces would face overwhelming numerical and technological superiority against the combined fleets of dozens of galactic civilizations. According to her analysis, humans would not just survive such a conflict, they would emerge victorious through application of strategies that no other species had developed. Hayes showed Kethvar weapon systems that had been developed specifically for fighting galactic civilizations, including devices that could disrupt the quantum communication networks that coordinated multi-species military operations. Humans had identified the critical infrastructure that enabled galactic cooperation and created methods for destroying it. "Your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness," Hayes noted. "Galactic civilization depends on predictable cooperation between species with compatible approaches to conflict. When that cooperation breaks down, your individual civilizations become vulnerable to opponents who do not require cooperation to be effective." Kethvar realized that humanity represented something. Galactic civilization had never encountered a species that viewed warfare as a problem to be solved through systematic application of scientific methods. Humans approached military conflict with the same methodical analysis they used for engineering projects or research initiatives. Morrison offered Kethvar a choice that would determine the future relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. He could file an accurate report that would likely result in a preemptive coalition against Earth, or he could submit a sanitized version that portrayed humans as merely another aggressive species within normal parameters. "If you tell the truth about what you have observed," Morrison explained, "your people will probably try to destroy us before we become too powerful, and that attempt will prove everything we have concluded about galactic military capabilities." The Admiral made it clear that humans had prepared for the possibility of galactic intervention. They had strategies for fighting defensive wars against overwhelming odds, and they believed those strategies would succeed. More disturbing was Morrison's obvious hope that such a conflict would occur. "We learn more about our capabilities when we face challenging opponents," Morrison said, A war against the entire galactic community would provide excellent opportunities for testing and refining our military doctrine. Kethvar spent days considering his options while human forces completed their final operations against the Zerion Collective. He watched human engineers led by Danny Murphy systematically analyze and absorb every useful technology they encountered. The humans were not just winning wars, they were evolving rapidly by incorporating the best innovations from every species they defeated. Captain Julie Kim demonstrated human military training methods that explained why their soldiers were so effective against superior opponents. Humans practiced scenarios where they faced impossible odds using inferior equipment against better organized enemies. They trained specifically for situations that other species would consider hopeless. "We assume that our enemies will have every possible advantage," Kim told her troops. "Our job is to win anyway by using advantages that they do not recognize or understand." The final piece of intelligence that influenced Kethvar's decision came from observing human civilian education systems. Children were being taught military history that emphasized victories achieved through unconventional tactics and technological innovation. Humans were systematically preparing their entire population for conflicts that had not yet occurred. General Bennett revealed during a planning session that Earth was already developing strategies for fighting hypothetical enemies with capabilities beyond anything currently known in the galaxy. Humans were preparing for wars against opponents. They had not yet discovered using technologies that did not yet exist. "We must always assume that more powerful civilizations exist somewhere in the galaxy," Bennett explained. "Our survival depends on developing methods for defeating enemies who are superior to us in every measurable way." Kethvar realized that filing an accurate report would not protect galactic civilization. It would simply trigger the conflict that humans had been preparing for since they first became aware of other intelligent species. Filing a false report would preserve peace temporarily, but leave the galaxy vulnerable to expansion by a species that had already demonstrated the ability to absorb and exceed any military technology they encountered. He sat in his observation ship staring at two different reports displayed on his console. One document told the complete truth about human military capabilities and strategic thinking. The other portrayed humans as a manageable threat that could be contained through conventional diplomatic and military pressure. Both choices led to the same eventual outcome. Humans would continue expanding their influence and capabilities regardless of galactic response. The only question was whether that expansion would occur through peaceful contact or through the systematic conquest that they had demonstrated against the Zerions. Kethvar made his choice and transmitted his report to Confederation headquarters, knowing that his decision would determine whether galactic civilization had months or years to prepare for the change that was coming. He could only hope that the choice he had made would give his people the best chance of surviving contact with humanity.